Chapter 7. Romancing a Cliff. Sitting on a stone chair facing Varshi across a table, Diego said, Jade was falling off the cliff and was clutching the air by instinct. She thought she would die in the desolate mountain. Then miracles happened. The air in the garden was fresh. Utterly amazed, Varshi asked, Jade got caught by a safety net? He smiled. She suddenly stopped falling and her hands had clutched a rope with knots. Was it a hallucination? She questioned herself. What had happened was baffling. She shook her head, trying to shake away her confusion. Then a voice trembled her, climb up using the rope if you want to live. She looked up. Isaac was about halfway between her and the rock, his hands gripping a relatively wide slit, his arms bent, and his feet pressing against a stone sticking out from the cliff. The other end of the rope was tied around his shoulder and neck. Isaac, it's not a dream, is it? She asked, her eyes wet. A dream will come true if you try hard. She pulled the rope but was too exhausted to bend her arms. She smiled bitterly. Hopefully, it won't be a nightmare. She took a deep breath and squeezed out her last bit of energy to climb the rope with her hands, each move heavy as carrying Mount Tai. She felt as if each pull on the rope was a tow to move a cargo truck forward. She clenched her teeth tight and pressed on. After she had advanced for half a pace, she bent her legs and clamped over the knot at the end of the rope. She breathed a sigh of relief. As knots were tied along the rope, utilizing both hands and feet, climbing became a lot easier. When she reached him, she wrapped her arms around his neck, hugging his back tightly. Only then did she feel safe and warm. She was sobbing uncontrollably. He felt the warmth of her tender body, and let her rest on his back for a while to recover her strength. After she had calmed down, with exquisite coordination, he moved to the left, and she took over his position. For a moment, Isaac hanged his whole body on the cliff with only 2 fingers, but he managed to pull himself up and grip another slit above with 2 of his other hand's fingers. Steadily, he climbed back to the beetle rock. He laid down on the rock, his feet hooked on its edge. He was facing her and the rope was still tied across his shoulder at one end. He flung the other end to her, but it was a foot short. So he untied the rope from his body, flinging one end to her and holding the other end tight. She seized it and hanged onto the knot at the end, but her strength failed her. She could no longer pull herself up with her hands only. He grasped the rope tight and collected the rope to pull her up, feeling the pain as the rope was thin. His hands were bleeding as she was steadily ascending. When she was within reach, he grabbed her arms, pulling her onto the rock. She sobbed uncontrollably, but thanked him many times. After she had calmed down a little, for safety, they stood up, hands gripping the cliff. She looked over her shoulder and saw Donald, who had reached the bottom and was running away. Isaac had totally heard 10 screams, so all other agents had died. He stayed silent until she had recovered from the fright. Then he greeted her like a friend. How are you doing? She smiled bitterly. Not too bad. It's a sensational experience to climb a cliff, more so to stand on a boulder sticking out from the cliff. You could try another sensation, sitting down. She smiled. This boulder may not be wide enough to seat 2 persons. Not wide enough for 2 Americans, but wide enough to seat 2 Asians. What a blessing. Fortune has befallen us. Yes, lucky us. What's your plan? Counting on you. A poor plan. My food and water could only last for 1 day for 1. Well, for 2 Asians. It's better to languish on this rock, to die here watching the sunset than falling off the cliff. Then tie your right hand wrist with this end of the rope and kneel behind it. Bend and clasp the floor of the rock. Enjoy watching the beautiful sunset. Jade obeyed, doing what he requested without questioning. Isaac also knelt down, facing the opposite direction, with one hand grabbing the cliff and the other hand holding a long segment of the rope. He raised the segment and whipped it against the edge of the rock. The segment swung under around the rock, swinging back to the top, over the back of Jade. He seized it punctually and passed it between the humans and the cliff. He pulled the rope and repeated the process many times, so that it coiled around the rock tightly, leaving only one end segment free. He tied his left-hand wrist at that end. Now it's safe to sit down. She sat down, folded her legs, and drank some water that he gave her. She slightly leaned against the coiled rope. He pulled the blanket laid behind the rope and covered her body with it, before sitting down and folding his legs. Her eyes turned red. She slowly extended the blanket to cover both of them and gently grabbed his right arm and raised it behind her neck. He seized her shoulder and they squeezed more to the center. His feeling was singular, hard to describe, sitting on a rock sticking out from the cliff, with so mysterious, so dangerous, and so tender a companion at his side. Thanks to you again, I live. Why did you risk your life to save me, a rotten soul? Jade asked tenderly. Did I? No, I didn't. I don't have the power. I provided the rope and you saved yourself. You and only you can save yourself. There was a moment of silence. When I was hanging on the slip, I prayed, the first time I ever prayed with my heart since I had become an adult. I confessed and asked for forgiveness from God. She said, I was so fearful of death. She went on to tell him about her emotional feelings then. Even if I perish on this rock, I could have my heart at ease. You may use your cell phone to call them to rescue you, Isaac said, trying to find out Jade's intentions. Everything is down there. They will come back tomorrow to remove and bury all bodies and destroy all evidence of their spying activities. You only have a window of at most 14 hours to leave this area, without being discovered by them. I thought all agents except Donald and you had died. The number of agents they have in this country is beyond your imagination, thanks to the huge trade surplus they acquire from this country every year, which funds their activities. They might reside in other states, but they could fly to here overnight upon receiving an order. Ha, they come before we run out of food. She stared at him, her eyes gleaming with concern and worry. It's no joking. They are very dangerous. Indeed, the pens we carry are fatal weapons. The point is sharp and strong, and the tube is filled with liquid extracted from the saliva of a kind of extremely poisonous snakes that could be found only in Africa. A person pricked by such a pen is equivalent to being bitten by the snake. Without medical treatment, the victim could die in 30 minutes. Donald is a first-rate agent and a fiend incarnate. He won't tell that other agents died because of his poor decision. He would make up a story, for example, saying that they were outnumbered by a gang led by you. Most likely, his superior knows that Donald lies. Donald knows that his superior knows he lies. In any way, each time we fail our mission of subduing you, you become more dangerous, brutal, and cunning at our record. Spying in this country is a big business, funded by American dollars via the huge trade deficit of this country. We send Americans goods, and they give us dollars. We bring the dollars back here to spy on them and infiltrate their government. No one wants to disrupt this lucrative business. God, I understand this thoroughly. That's the way your current national leader handles problems, cover up and lying to the people. He censors all truth and covers up all kinds of disasters, flooding, swine flu, fake vaccines, poisonous food, protests, an unlimited list. He rules by lies. All officials know he lies and treats him as a foolish clown. But they just do what he does, lying to each other. When will this sad and foolish game end? When will the game end? I don't know, but you must get down the cliff before they come. This time, they will come with weapons and cliff-climbing tools. She urged him again. I have no problem getting down, but how about you? Don't worry about me. You have done enough for me. When they come, they might rescue me. Might? Sure, Donald will come up here to rescue you, but on the way down, he would give you a shove to make you die of an accident. You know his secret of giving a bad command, that caused the death of 10 agents. No, I am not stupid enough to let him kill me. I can make a deal with him. I'll cover his lies, and he will cover mine. We are all actors. Even if I die, I die. I cannot let you die because of me, she said earnestly. He was moved by what she said, though he could not tell if she was acting. Facing death, Fearful revelations might temporarily bend her to earth, but might not have forever changed her. A human who has been brainwashed for a long time could behave like a spring, which deforms and stretches when pulled by a strong force, but when the force is gone, it might restore to its original form. Isaac smiled. You have saved your soul. I must save your body. She stared at him, warm and intimate, filled with thankfulness. Her tenderness could melt the heart of any young man. How? She asked. One way is to reverse the process you climbed here. I made use of this rope to help you get to that wide slit again. But this is too dangerous. Any better alternative? He ignored her question, staring at a distant valley. You will find out. Why did they try so hard to get me or to murder me? He asked. According to the instructions I received, you are an extremely dangerous fugitive and possess fatal weapons. You conspire with external forces, trying to overthrow our government. When they first sent 3 policemen to arrest Pearl, a so-called counter-revolutionist, you led a gang of thugs to attack the police. Of course, you were a national team member. Your deflecting could make them look bad. That's ridiculous. They intruded on Pearl's home without showing any arrest warrant. I beat them badly out of defense and only knew that they were policemen afterward. I acted in solo. Isaac, I believe you 100%. I could imagine what had happened. The 3 policemen you beat were mad at you, hating you like the devil. They made up the story to accuse you. They would look very bad and stupid if they told the truth. Didn't they need to show evidence? No one cares evidence. What the government says is always the truth and the only truth. What enemies say are always lies. Our government's annual stability maintenance expenditure increases every year and has exceeded that of the military, unique in the world. The more such fees we get, the more unstable our nation becomes. Like spying, stability maintenance has also become a lucrative business. Any minor conflict or dispute will be exaggerated as a national threat. He sighed deeply. She continued, I am sorry. When Donald and I failed our mission in abducting you in Hong Kong, we also lied. We made up a story in which we were brave and executed the task intelligently. You could get away only because a group of US CIA agents intercepted with fatal weapons. We were outnumbered, so we let you go and lost you. So, I conspired with foreign powers, trying to overthrow your government. No wonder they want to terminate me badly. He said, smiling bitterly. The sun dropped below the horizon and the mountains appeared gray, barely illuminated by the residual rays scattered at the horizon. She talked about her confession when she hanged at the cliff and faced death. He listened with great interest. As she opened up, the barrier between them, the barrier of distrust and constraint began to dissolve. Inwardly, he still tried to reject her. After sunset, the temperature dropped sharply. A magnificent glittering network of stars emerged, hanging high and aloof. She was deeply attracted by the starlight, gorgeous and breathtaking. Isaac leaned further back against the rope coil to watch the sky. She slowly slid her head down his shoulder and eventually laid it on his bosom, staring at the starry sky. She softly sang the folk song The Star, her voice sweet. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Isaac suddenly felt relaxed and joyful. He caught a glimpse of her face and felt an unfamiliar scent of wheedling warmth. In her eyes, there was peace and intimacy, neither insanity, nor hatred, nor any fear. He kissed her cheeks lightly and felt blissful, a blossom of happiness that all hearts yearn. He had allowed her to conquer him by tenacious gentleness. Isaac, you always wander around by yourself. Don't you feel lonely and wish to have a companion? She asked. That would be too luxury a wish for me. She strained her eyes, speaking softly as if she was murmuring to herself. The system has made people stop growing in wisdom and joy, but become greedy in power and addicted to telling lies. I live in a whirl of self-destroying lies, constantly making up stories to cover up previous cover-ups. While I was praised by my superiors and colleagues for my outstanding achievements and as a model agent, my anxious soul was full of apprehension. My reminiscences about my work were sorrowful and painful to recall. We lived in a world of debauchery that I blasphemed and cursed. Inwardly, I was always nervous and bitter, feeling unsafe and worrying that they would one day sacrifice me, piercing my bubble of lies to protect their bubbles, and I would spend the rest of my life in jail. I never felt I was one with my companions and remained lonely in their midst. Deep in my mind, I am filled with an ardent desire for love, yearning for someone I could follow. It was a hopeless longing. She slowly opened her eyes and stared at him with much intimacy. Isaac, I feel nausea of my job, tired of listening to their speech of praising the grand views and achievements of our leader that no one believes. Could you take me with you? I'll give up everything I have and follow you wherever you go and serve you. She whispered. He laughed. Jade, I am homeless. I don't care. I could be homeless too, always resting near you. I'll sing you a song when you are in a bad mood and tell you a story when you feel bored. I have longed for a life that I can live free, which is impossible in my motherland. If I were given only two choices, an exiled homeless life in this free country or a billionaire in my motherland, I would not hesitate to choose the former. It is adorable to live here and I don't want to go back. I am sick of lying. I wanted nothing more than to live a life I can speak freely. She said intimately. He chuckled. That's your fantasy imagination. You have lived a life of luxury and strived for affluence. The reality of homeless is cruel, rough, dangerous, and humiliating. That's why so many people sell their souls to trade for materials. After going through the cycle of life and death a few times, I am ready to accept such a life. She said earnestly. Jade, it is not time yet for you to deflect from Strong Nation, your motherland, as you have family members there. Once connected, ties to demons can never be severed so easily. I have an aspiration to accomplish a mission and I could not take care of you. When the time is right, I'll help you to deflect. Isaac, whether you accomplish your mission or not won't change the trend. If devil wins, it wins. That's people's choice. Your mission is like chasing shapes that morph constantly. When the end of all things comes, there's nothing we can do. We could only choose our own paths, but could not choose for others. If we fail, there are no more choices of paths. Everyone is forced to travel the same path, and is under surveillance, doing what they tell you to do, narrating according to their tones, and covering up all the lies. I would cling to a mediocre moment. We could not resist the tide. He sighed. He was torn asunder by different emotions. Darkness swallowed the mountains. Jade, I am going to teach you some secret code, and you could use it to convey me a hidden short message in the future if necessary. Then he spent a couple of hours explaining a special secret Tatesel code not known by the public. We will leave here when dawn breaks. Now, have a good sleep, he said after she had understood the code. He closed his eyes to meditate and fell asleep, tired but uneasy, dimly aware of the crying of the animals. When he woke, dawn had broken, and he felt something strange had happened. His right hand was touching a cold object. He remembered well Jade was sitting next to him last night, but now the space was empty, and he was touching the rock. Were her appearance and conversations a dream? He shook his head as if shaking away the hideous thought. He became fully awake. It was not a dream. Jade had gone. She had taken a great risk to leave by herself. He was frightened, feeling sad, and a sense of loss. He cried tumultuously, Jade. Suddenly, he felt some movement of the blanket. He pulled the blanket up and saw the rope hanging down the rock. Then a foot came from below the rock, pressing against its edge. He heard a cry and felt a pull of the rope. Jade sprang onto the rock and sat next to him. Good morning, she said, smiling. Good morning. You found a better place to sleep? She smiled. I drank too much water last night, so I just went to a natural bathroom under this rock. It threw him into hysterics. You were committing suicide. I wish I had a choice. Now you finally have a taste of homeless life. Are you ready to go? Certainly. He collected the blanket. This blanket is made of special materials that could resist strong tear and shear and even fire. It is specially tailored for making a simplified hang glider or a wingsuit, whatever you want to call it. It has tubular selvages at the four sides that I can insert thin tubes in. As he said, he took out a thin tube from his bag and pulled it, which actually contains thinner concentric tubes. When he fully extended the concentric tubes, which were connected, they totally measured more than 6 feet. The tubes have holes for other tubes inserting into them. He took 3 more sets of tubes, 2 of which were significantly shorter. He inserted the 2 long tubes into 2 selvages of the blanket and locked the long tubes by inserting short tubes into the holes at their ends. Jade was much amused by what he did. We still need some curved splines to steady the blanket at the center. Where do we get the splines? He pointed at a distant valley. I hid some in the crevice of a boulder down there. She was astonished but did not understand how he could get them. I am going to ask 2 friends for help. You carry a cell phone? No, I never possess any cell phone. He took a breath and made a long screeching sound. Soon 2 eagles appeared in the sky and flew toward him. He opened his arms, and the eagles alighted on them. He pointed at the valley and screeched again. As the eagles flew away, he held 2 bags of seeds in his hands. Before long, the eagles flew back, their claws grasping objects that looked like long sticks tied together. The eagles dropped the sticks on the rock, and grasped the 2 bags of seeds from him. I tamed the eagles a year ago and fed them seeds often. These are our splines, which are also made of special materials, strong but easily bent. He passed them, a total of 6, through cloth rings which were knitted to the blanket and inserted their ends to the tubes. With the splines, he finished constructing the glider. You are so well prepared. Did you foresee this to happen? She asked. No, I prepare every day. As I run around, I hide tools in various locations, mostly in California and Arizona. I am lucky again. You'll find out. This glider is designed for 1 person for emergency use. I am not sure if it works for 2, but we have to try, he said, explaining how to use and navigate it. After untying the rope from their wrists, he cautiously collected everything. He carried the bag on his back, tied one end of the rope to his forearm, and wrapped the remaining around his shoulder. They stood up side by side with Isaac at the outside of the rock. Then they wore the glider, with hands grasping the tube at the top, and feet hooking on the tube at the bottom. He cried, 1, 2, 3, go. They bent forward and fell off the cliff. The glider took a deep dip and Jade gave out a nervous cry. It must be an omen of ill fortune, she thought. As the glider took another dip, her heart sank and fear enveloped her. She had expected the gliding to be smooth. Then it rose a little and dipped again, gliding along the cliff toward another side of it, where the slope was gentler. The sun rose, sky blue, air fresh, and eagles screeching. The scenery was magnificent as they flew across the cliff. Then the glider wobbled for some time, and drifted again. Her heart was beating with wild fear, and then they plunged further, before gliding smoothly for a distance. More fun than riding an airplane, she said, recovered from her fear. Even more fun when we land. It is descending faster than it should be, Isaac said. I thought landing is always boring. The airplane rattled, giving out annoying noise, and then came to a stop. She said, trying to say something to overcome her fear. Only if it doesn't crash, he said. Her heart sank again. She smiled bitterly. Time to pray again. Definitely. At least I have a good plan to land. He was surprised. What is it? Counting on you. My only plan. Don't easily trust any man. Agree. I am smart to trust you. I don't trust myself. No regret if we die together. A smart person may sometimes make poor decisions. But now God guides me. And bless you. Bless us. After about 15 minutes, they suddenly descended rapidly. It seemed that they were destined to crash onto the ground while they were flying over a pine forest on the slope of a mountain. Wrap your right arm around my neck. Release the glider when necessary. We are going to land soon, he cried. He grasped the glider tube with one hand and held the coil of rope with the other. When the glider flew near some tall pine trees, he swung the rope toward one of them. The rope caught the tree, which was bent by their great momentum. He released the glider and grasped her waist. The glider fell off as they swung violently around the tree. After they had rotated around the tree for a few rounds, their speed died down and they grasped some thin branches of the pine tree to stop their motion. Jade climbed down the tree, breaking a couple of branches on the way. She stood on the ground to watch Isaac, who swung softly in the opposite direction to unwrap the rope before climbing down. We made it, she cried joyfully, and she told him her fearful feeling while she was in the air. Lucky us. It should be safe for you to get down the mountain along the slope. There's a path that you could run back to town, though it may take a few hours, he spoke as he collected the items falling on the ground. Her heart sank. Thanks, I'll find the way, she said sadly. Going with her would be pleasant and elevating, he thought. Not only that she was attractive and tender, but she was wise and gentle and could speak of his games and adventures with reverence or with supplication. But he did not fully trust her. He could not afford to do so, and he must hide his destinations. His yearning from within himself and his fate seemed strangely torn asunder. She looked at him with a ton of tenderness. Isaac, you are courageous and sweetly courteous. Before you leave, let me present you a gift, the least that I could do to express my gratitude. Impelled by rapturous curiosity, he said, I would gratefully accept your gift. She stepped onto a gentle grassland between pine trees and stared at him with warmth and admiration. She softly unbuttoned the uppermost button of her shirt, which was close to her neck, pale and tender, and gently untied the rosy ribbon sash belt from her waist. She bowed and knelt with one knee. She hurled one end of the belt onto the grassland, which extended to about 8 feet, lying in front of her. The song and dance I am going to perform is called Sorrow of Ocean Terrace, which was about the rise, struggle, and decline of the last significant emperor of Qing dynasty. He nodded with gratitude. Let me get up to that large boulder to watch. He carried everything and climbed onto the boulder, sitting down with legs folded and staring at her. Start, please. She shook the belt, which vibrated like waves in an ocean. She rotated her body and swung her arm. The sash shot up, whirling around her, like a bundle of rose petals blown up by the wind, swirling in the air, flying between the green pines. She leapt into the air, kicking and stretching, and landed with one leg, swinging the other to produce swift rotations which brought the belt to form a rosy cylinder, brilliant and aromatic, circulating her. He watched her dexterous control of the ribbon in astonishment, her chain of movements nearly infallible. The combination of frenzy rotations, leaps and kicks induced on the audience an enlightening and alluring feeling of a youngster striving for his dreams. As she continued her fabulous dance, she began to sing. Isaac was amused by her performance. He took out a flute and brought it to his lips. He blew the melody, mingling with her radiant dance. She sang with a light and swift tone, glorifying the sun which brought light to mountains and oceans, nursing the earth. He felt like being home and content with the mountain, the greens, the dance, and the moment. Never had he watched any dance and song that he felt so emotional, so soothing. He was deeply absorbed in her performance, which was washing away his loneliness. He had led a solitary life, running in the mountains and under the sky, and dwelt entirely alone for years. Within his body and soul hid all the instincts which could lead a man to temptation and distress. There were times he had longed for a companion who could tell him stories when he was boring and to soothe him when he was in bad mood. He struggled to resist all the temptations as he had not forgotten his mission nor his hatred of the devils. After about 10 minutes, the rhythm of her dance slowed down, and her song sounded less brazen as if the sun was not shining, and the tone changed from vigor to tumult. Her poses shrank and movements slowed as if the sky sank into itself, wrapped itself up, and became gray and sultry, and the lyrics, which had glorified life now became sad, life went astray, struggles turned into vicious fights, and was trapped in an endless vicious cycle, darkness prevailing upon darkness until everlasting darkness fell, and the sun no longer rose or set. Isaac was moved by her song and had a strong emotion of not leaving her alone in the mountain. He stopped playing his flute, put it back into his bag, and wore on his glider. Then she danced with a few peculiar movements that looked as if he was making a confession. Finally, all sound and movement stopped, the forest sinking into stillness and silence. She ended with the same pose she started, with one knee kneeling on the ground. She stood up and bowed to him, her eyes red and wet. From the depths of the pine forest came the long cry of a coyote. He hardened his heart. "Thank you so much for your song and merriment, and your great performance. Farewell, Jade," he said, grudgingly jumping off the boulder to the other side of the mountain, which had a much sharper slope. He glided on along with mighty urges. She stepped forward, watching the glider vanishing into the deep valley. Since then, he had not heard anything from her. She would go back to her organization safely, and would make up stories to cover up her adventures with him, he thought. Her countenance and song and dance were deeply etched on his memory. A remarkable adventure? Varshi said. Indeed. I spent a great amount of time recording this in my journal and read it many times. I assume that Jade told Isaac her confessions when she was hanging on the cliff, and Isaac told you. Varshi said. Diego nodded. Yes, everything is based on what he told me. Some facts could be his interpretations. Varshi nodded and smiled. After Diego left, Varshi again fell into deep thinking.